Thanks everyone. It's great to have you all here at Atlassian. I hope you've enjoyed your day so far. So as Robin said, my name is Roger and I'm a product manager. I'm across the DevOps and ITSM solutions, focusing on our self-hosted products. So if you're using server or data center editions of our products, that's my problem to make better. And so you're probably familiar somewhat with Atlassian, but for those who aren't, we're really all about teams. We're so obsessed that some of us went down to Martin Place recently and spelled it out on the ground. And it really is a singular obsession and something that we see that really does power the world. In fact, there are 112,000 customers, enterprises and organizations like yourselves around the world that are using our tools every day to do amazing things. And that's what really motivates us to get up in the morning. And so, yeah, there are some really amazing things that are being built. And the world really is getting faster, more competitive. There's some crazy tech out there, but even within more traditional industries, there's a lot of really interesting things going on. And what's happening is that software is really starting to be a big driver of that. You can be in finance, pharma, you name it, and if you're not innovating with software, there's a very good chance that you'll be falling behind very soon if you haven't already. And so really what we want to think about here is how it comes back to teamwork. And we do think that great teamwork is made up of a combination of things: great people, great products, and great practices. And this is generally applicable to teams before we even dive into the software world. So what I want to talk about today is, well, how do we think about this in the software context? And where are we at the moment? So no doubt many of you have already adopted Agile and Git. The numbers, and these numbers are probably a little bit old now, show that over 77% of organizations have adopted Agile, and a similar number have adopted Git. And that's just one example of, or one way of doing source control in a faster way. There are other sort of distributed systems available, but Git by a large margin is now the dominant technology in use. Now these techniques and tools are really great, but we're not exactly all happy and saying, yeah, we've done it, we're done, cool, excellent. We're still having problems. We're still seeing that releases slip. We're still having friction between dev and ops teams. Infrastructure's on fire, SLAs are being missed. There's still problems. And the Agile and Git were great for this, but it's not its fault that we're still in this situation. And the reason for that is that, as we've heard from others today, silos are forming. People are organized into these groups, operations is getting involved late, customer service is kept out of the loop, things catch fire, and people are having to scramble or go back to and rework things when they didn't expect to have to. And what we're finding is that there's actually a better way of working. And the question, obviously, what comes after Agile? You're all here for DevOps. There's that answer. We've seen a couple of definitions today, and they're all really good. I think I'm not going to rehash those. One thing that we like to think about in terms of DevOps adoption is that a lot of the focus comes down to flow. So you've got work that needs to move through a system, some of it planned, some of it unplanned. And how do you get that work from A to B in the most efficient way, quickly, with happy developers, happy operations, and with the minimum of interruption possible. And everyone has a different A and B. So when people come to DevOps events going, well, how do I do it? It's like, it kind of depends on where you're at. And I have to apologize that no one's going to tell you exactly what to do, but that's where personalized input can come in, and we'll talk a bit about how services like the ones that Glintech offer really can help. And when we think about flow in a bit more detail, it really breaks down into these three ways of DevOps that were coined by Gene Kim back in the early days that DevOps was sort of originally thought of. This idea of systems thinking, amplifying feedback, and continuous experimentation. Or simplifying that, knowing the flow, understanding how your work goes from idea to production, and having everyone understand that. Amplifying feedback is really about controlling the flow, about being able to say, well, I want this to happen when this happens, being able to automate this, being able to increase the visibility for the right people of another piece of work to somebody else. And then continuous experimentation is the ability to improve the flow, being able to try things in a safe way, being able to learn from that, and over time, your flow, your system, gets better. And really what this comes down to, or something that needs to be thought about, is that DevOps is everyone's job. It's actually a whole new way of working. You can definitely adopt DevOps practices and principles. You can be more agile, you can do more Git. But if people aren't collaborating and working closely together, there's a good chance you're not getting all the benefit of it. You can have someone on your team who's a DevOps engineer and uses Puppet, and that's awesome. But that's not the whole story. There's still a whole collaboration and culture aspect to this, which we'll talk about today. Now, this was touched on in the first talk from Zach from Puppet. These numbers are actually from 2016. His numbers are more up to date. So he had 440 times more frequent deployments. I strongly recommend this State of DevOps report. It's really good. Atlassian also co-sponsors it. And it really does point to some very specific things you can think about when it comes to DevOps adoption. Let's break down some of the elements that we do often come across. We've spoken a lot about culture, practices, and tools. First, let's have a look at culture. Really, it's about having a shared understanding and a culture of collaboration. Do people understand what the other part of their team is working on or worried about? Is there a cross-pollination of ideas and information? Is information visible and transparent? Is effective communication occurring? Often, a lot of the time, if you do look at your root causes, one of them is often a communication breakdown of some kind or some flavour. And so if you've got teams that aren't quite running on all cylinders in terms of culture and collaboration, what can you do? Well, something that we found very, very useful, so much so that we've actually open sourced it and released it to the world, is the Atlassian team playbook. This is basically a set of plays, things that you can do, rituals that you can do as a team. First, using something like a team health monitor to understand how your team health is. There's actually different flavors for different kinds of teams, and they ask questions about, is there a shared understanding? Do we have a shared understanding of the success criteria or the metrics for our team? Do we have velocity? Those sorts of things. Is there full-time ownership for things? And then based on the results of that, there are different plays that you can try to actually try and get better. So one example would be that there may be some misunderstanding about who's supposed to do what. The roles and responsibilities play can come in there and help figure that out at an even lower level than the health monitor would. You can find this at atlassian.com/teamplaybook. And if you've got Confluence, there's some templates baked into it there as well. So let's now touch on practices. We talked a little bit before about Git and Agile, or DVCS is the more general term for the practices there. And of course, continuous integration and delivery is another one. And really when it comes to adopting DevOps, if you're not doing something in these sorts of areas, they're probably a good place to start looking first. DevOps really is building upon the ability for a development team to move fast in Agile, or for the code to move fast in DVCS, or for it to get quickly to production in CI and CD, is taking all of that and then building upon it and actually getting everyone working more closely together. So let's break that down. First, Agile, probably familiar to many of you. If you do need more guidance or are really just starting in that sort of space, we have a lot of thought leadership and content on that topic at atlassian.com/agile. If you're looking at how you build upon those Agile practices and actually apply it in how your source code actually changes, Git is awesome for isolating changes, for managing how and when code gets merged, and on top of that, actually making sure that it is peer reviewed, which is where products built on top of Git can come in, are really, really powerful. And so for more information about that, we have atlassian.com/git. You could probably do DevOps practices on Subversion, but you're going to be wanting for other things in that space pretty quickly. And then there's CI/CD, the idea that you'll be able to continuously test and have the option of continually deploying your software at any given time. Making sure that tests are written for all your code, so that you're not doing a large undertaking in terms of manual testing and integrations and having go, no-go meetings, all those sorts of things that can slow down deployment. You want to be able to get out quick iterations, and to do that, you need automation. And so then we get to tools, and tools really are something that can support all of these practices and even help with the collaboration side of things. There often is a very, very big focus on this, that you can buy DevOps, you can buy some DevOps tools and you get DevOps. Everyone's got DevOps tools already. Is everyone doing it? Well, that's where those other things come in. It's actually about using them properly, but it is worth talking about how they do play a part. So here we have actually quite a range of different product offerings that cover various aspects of what we see as the DevOps lifecycle. There's collaboration throughout the entire cycle. There's planning, building, testing, deploying, monitoring, operating, and getting feedback. And so I want to take you on a quick journey through how some of these tools fit together, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what other tools might be involved as well. So in this hypothetical situation, we have a company called Teams in Space, and they have an established product already out there, and we're going to check in with them and see where they're at when an incident occurs. So they've got some development going on, they have operations teams in place, but an incident's occurred. And so the team is already hanging out in their HipChat room or Stride room in future, and PagerDuty comes along and says, hey, there's a problem in production. So already we can see other integrations come into play. And so Sam, our operations engineer, gets onto things and basically triggers an incident, says this is a thing and we need to get people together. And in doing so, this notifies the development team. They need to be brought in, they built it, they own it. It's not just the operations team getting involved at this point. And what they're doing is we're creating a Jira Service Desk ticket first to track that that exists. Looks a bit like that. And those notifications are then triggered. So Sally will be on her mobile, she's got a chat client there, she can see that something's going on and gets involved. And the team can then swarm. And two things happen at this point. The first is we want our customers, assuming this is a major outage, to know what's going on. We have a cloud-hosted product called Status Page, and this is a good thing to have cloud-hosted because if your data center's down, Status Page will still be up, to let your customers know what's going on. And separately, they kick off a process of figuring out what's going on. So Status Page looks a little bit like this. And then in Confluence, you might have runbooks, some plays that actually help the team get on the same page to make sure that they go through the right steps, ask the right questions. The process in the PagerDuty talk before was really awesome in talking about the sorts of things you need to have covered there. And so the team identifies what needs to happen. In this case, they need to add another node to the cluster. That will tide things over for the time being, having identified what the issue is. Separately, there is a longer-term fix involved. And so that gets added to the backlog in Jira Software. And that's linked back to the original incident in Jira Service Desk. So now the development team has something on their radar to think about. Meanwhile, the incident has largely been resolved from a customer perspective. So Status Page goes green again, and the team gets into an incident post-mortem mode. And we find that Confluence is a really good place to do this. You can collect up the logs from HipChat and other places and get everything sort of figured out there. So going back to that issue that was reported, in some stage that gets prioritized by the development team. They pick it up from Jira Software, and from Jira Software we have an integrated series of workflow steps that really keep everything quite tied together and visible. So you can create a branch in your Bitbucket repository, which is based on Git, straight from Jira, and it tags the work that you're about to do so that it's actually tracked back to the issue. And a really key part of what Bitbucket does is provide for pull requests. So the work that's happened on that branch, you assign reviewers, it gets reviewed, gets approved, and then merged back into the master. And then Bamboo kicks in. In fact, Bamboo kicks in earlier. It can be building your branch before it's even merged, but certainly you want to be building your main line as well. And then all of this information connects all the way back into Jira. So for any given issue that you've been tracking, you can see where it's at from a development point of view. It's not just the status of the issue saying in progress. You know that it's in review and that the build's passing and that it's probably good to merge soon and it's probably going to go out to production today. And then finally, there's a release process. Some may be doing continuous deployment and this is automatic, as we saw with the Docker talk before. Others prefer to have this as a bit of a gated sort of process. And so in Jira Software, you have a release hub where you can see the issues that have been worked on that have not yet been deployed. You can see if there are any that are a bit out of whack that think they're in future releases or that actually aren't really finished yet from a development perspective. And then we can trigger that release, which Bamboo takes care of. And so we've touched on a few things here. We've talked about how culture is important, and now you can see how collaboration can be really supported by tools that provide open visibility and connectivity between them. We've seen how you can release faster and work smarter through automation. All of the linkages between information was automated. We've seen fast feedback loops and incident management. By having teams already swarming and knowing how to get work done in collaboration tools built for that purpose, they've spent less time trying to figure out what to do and just gotten on and done it. And then finally, they've been able to prioritize and manage that unplanned work in amongst the rest of their backlog. Now, I showed you before the infinity loop with Atlassian products on it, but we do obviously need to integrate with other things. And we do like to think about how we provided that culture and collaboration layer, but on top of that, there's so many different ways that people build software. You might want to use New Relic, you might need to use Puppet, you might need to deploy to AWS or to somewhere else. We're embracing of all of that sort of thing. There's a lot of extensibility built into the product, and there's a lot of first-class integrations already out there that let you hook in whatever things you need to on top of this. So if you've got 100 teams and they all work 100 different ways, you can support them in working at least 100 different ways where they need to, but not with every single bit of tooling all the way down to the collaboration and tracking layer. And we think that's actually quite important. As you try to scale DevOps out, if you have people trying to share best practices across teams or people moving between teams and they move to a completely different stack, there's a lot of value to be had in having some sort of common foundation for how you actually get work done in your organization. And then, as I mentioned, there is that ability still to customize on top. And what this gives you is things like economies of scale. You also have tools that are really actually built for that sort of scale. So you get reliability. We have clustered editions of our products. There's performance at scale benefits with that as well. And then there's the administration burden as well that goes down. The overall risk and cost of ownership goes down because you're exposed to less things. And so fundamentally what we think is that Atlassian can be the culture and collaboration layer of DevOps in any organization that's building software, which is pretty much every organization today. So we've covered a lot of things pretty quickly. And you might be wondering, well, okay, where do I start? And as I said before, I think this is really a good time to have a conversation. You can do a lot of self-assessment type of stuff, but it's also good to talk to people who have done this for lots of other organizations before. And of course, use the networking time here today to talk to each other, to learn more. But companies like Glintech also are awesome at taking the experience that they have and getting teams up and running really quickly. So thank you for your time. We do have some more guidance as well on our own website, atlassian.com/DevOps. And there is a Start Your Journey page in particular, which will help get you on your way. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. It's an excellent question. And for my part, I'm very familiar with the more software side of DevOps, and the ITSM is a bit newer for me. However, we are seeing quite a bit of movement towards what we're calling lean ITSM. And it's not that you throw ITIL out the window, but you actually sort of think about what is meaningful to you. What you are using and finding useful, and even peeling it back and saying, are there new ways to do this? Especially as software teams are trying to move faster, they're trying to make decisions more quickly. And some examples we do see are things like, if you're running, say, Jira Service Desk, you can have a change approval process that's simplified down for the vast majority of change requests, where only certain ones need significant review. And that's already kind of part of that idea of a CAB. But it's actually just taking that to the next level and just finding ways to basically say, well, the risk here is lower because we're doing smaller batches of work on a faster basis. We're breaking it down more. Therefore, the need for this oversight and this approval goes down as well. So I think it's sort of organically shifting towards that sort of thing over time. And I'm looking forward to figuring out more how teams who have done it myself are doing that. Maybe others here can share their stories with you. Anecdotally, it seems that usually there's more of a top-down kind of approach when that's worked because no one has a choice. If it's more peer level, yeah, that can be a much harder conversation because there just may not be agreement.